A lonely man walks through a freezing forest, carrying a letter he is too afraid to open. The wind is screaming. The trees barely move. And somewhere deep in the darkness, his brother is waiting. But this is not a reunion story. This is a story about guilt, about war, about the kind of memories that never die. And by the end of this movie, one truth changes everything. Released in 2025, Anemone is a psychological drama thriller directed by Ronan Day-Lewis and starring Daniel Day-Lewis in his long-awaited return to cinema. The movie follows two estranged brothers who reconnect after decades apart, forcing buried trauma and painful secrets back into the light. This film moves slowly, but every silence feels dangerous. And trust me, the ending leaves a scar. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the full story of Anemone. The movie opens with cold gray skies over northern England. Rain hits the windows of a moving train. Inside sits a tired old man named Jem Stoker. His face says everything before he even speaks. This is a man carrying years of regret. He keeps staring at a folded letter in his pocket, but he cannot bring himself to read it again. The soundtrack is quiet, just soft breathing, metal wheels, and distant thunder. Right away, the film creates tension. Something terrible happened between Jem and his brother, and today he is finally going back. We slowly learn that Jem once served in Northern Ireland during the violent conflict years earlier. His younger brother, Ray, served beside him. But after one horrifying incident, Ray disappeared from society completely. Nobody has seen him in years, not even family. Now Jem's wife Nessa has begged him to find Ray because Jem's son Brian is starting to show signs of the same anger and violence that destroyed their family. The film quietly suggests that trauma moves through generations like poison, and this becomes one of the movie's biggest themes. Jem leaves the town behind and enters a massive forest near the coast. The cinematography here is stunning. Every shot feels lonely. The deeper Jem walks, the quieter the world becomes. Then suddenly he notices strange wooden carvings hanging from trees. Old military symbols. Some are burned. Some are covered in mud. It feels like the forest itself remembers the war. At night, Jem finally reaches a small, isolated cabin. Smoke rises from the chimney. Someone is inside. But before he can knock, a shotgun appears at the window. And then we finally meet Ray. Ray is terrifying without even trying. Long beard, tired eyes, silent movements. Daniel Day-Lewis plays him like a ghost trapped inside a human body. Ray says almost nothing at first. He simply stares at Jem. No hug, no emotion, just years of hatred sitting between them. Jem explains that Nessa sent him, but Ray immediately becomes angry. He says the family should have left him dead years ago. Right away, viewers start asking questions. What exactly happened in the past? Why does Ray blame himself so much? And why does he live hidden in the woods like a criminal? The movie refuses to answer immediately. Instead, it slowly builds tension through conversations. Silence becomes more uncomfortable than violence. That night, Ray drinks heavily, while Jem tries to convince him to return home. Suddenly, Ray hears children laughing outside. He freezes. The screen cuts, and we get the first flashback. Northern Ireland, late 1980s. Young soldiers moving through dark streets. Gunfire in the distance. Ray and Jem are part of a military operation. Everything feels chaotic. People are screaming. A car explodes nearby. Then the flashback ends abruptly before we see the full truth. The movie constantly does this. It gives viewers fragments, tiny pieces of trauma, never the complete picture, and that mystery keeps the audience locked in. Back in town, we meet Brian, Jem's teenage son, quiet, angry, emotionally disconnected. He recently joined military training despite his mother begging him not to. Brian clearly idolizes the violent image of masculinity passed down through his family. There's one chilling scene where Brian punches another recruit repeatedly long after the fight ends. Everyone watches in silence, and for a second Brian almost looks possessed. The movie is showing us how unresolved pain spreads from father to son. Brian never experienced the war himself, but somehow the war is already inside him. The next morning, Jem finally gives Ray the letter. Ray refuses to open it. Instead, he throws it into the fireplace. But before it fully burns, we briefly see one sentence. Brian is becoming you. That line changes the energy of the movie instantly. Ray suddenly looks terrified, not angry, terrified. For the first time, viewers realize Ray isn't hiding from others. He is hiding from himself. As the brothers spend more time together, old memories slowly return. And then the movie finally reveals the central tragedy. Years earlier, during a military patrol, Ray mistakenly shot a young boy during a moment of panic. The child was innocent, but the military covered the incident. No investigation, no justice. Jem helped hide the truth. That single moment destroyed Ray psychologically. And from that day onward, he believed he no longer deserved a normal life. The flashback scene is brutal because the movie doesn't use loud music. No dramatic slow motion. Just confusion, fear, one gunshot, then silence. The silence afterward feels unbearable. From this point, the movie becomes increasingly psychological. Ray starts seeing strange visions near the ocean cliffs. Sometimes he hears children singing. Sometimes he sees flowers growing inside abandoned military helmets. The anemone flower becomes an important symbol. It represents fragile beauty, surviving in dangerous environments. Just like the characters, Ray grows anemones beside his cabin because his father once taught him they can survive storms by bending instead of resisting. But Ray never learned how to bend. He only learned how to break. Halfway through the movie, a massive storm hits the coast. This is easily one of the film's most intense scenes. Brian suddenly arrives at the cabin after running away from home. Now all three generations are together, and the tension becomes unbearable. Brian admires Ray immediately. He sees him as strong, fearless, a real man. But Ray becomes disturbed because Brian reminds him of his younger self. At dinner, Brian talks excitedly about violence during military training, and then Ray suddenly explodes. He slams the table, screams that war destroys everything. The room falls silent. Rain pounds the cabin. Lightning flashes through the windows. Brian looks shocked, because this is the first time someone has told him the truth. Not the heroic version, the real version. Late that night, Ray and Brian sit beside the ocean. This scene is quiet, but incredibly powerful. Ray finally confesses what happened to the boy decades earlier. Brian expects a heroic war story. Instead, he hears about fear, mistakes, and guilt. Ray tells him, violence doesn't make men strong. It only teaches them how to hide pain. That line becomes the emotional core of the movie. Brian begins crying silently. And for the first time, the cycle of inherited trauma starts breaking. But the movie still has one final twist waiting. The next morning, Jem admits something horrifying. Ray did not actually fire the fatal shot. Jem did. For decades, Ray blamed himself because Jem allowed him to carry the guilt. The revelation hits like a punch. Suddenly, every earlier scene changes meaning. Ray destroyed his own life, protecting his brother. And Jem stayed silent because he was too weak to confess. The emotional tension here is explosive. Ray starts laughing uncontrollably. Not because it's funny, because his entire identity was built on a lie. Then the laughter slowly turns into tears. Daniel Day-Lewis absolutely dominates this scene. You can feel years of suffering collapsing all at once. The climax happens during sunrise near the cliffs overlooking the ocean. The pacing becomes faster. Music grows louder. The wind roars. Ray walks toward the edge while Jem desperately follows him. Both brothers scream at each other. Decades of pain finally explode. Jem begs for forgiveness. Ray asks one devastating question. If it was you, why did you let me disappear? Jem cannot answer, because there is no answer. Only shame. For a moment, it feels like Ray might jump. The movie holds a silence for several seconds. Then Brian suddenly arrives. He tells Ray that running away only creates more broken people. That line stops him. Ray looks at the ocean, then at the sunrise, and slowly steps back from the edge. Not because he is healed, but because for the first time someone finally told the truth. The ending is quiet. No huge dramatic music. No perfect happy resolution. Weeks later, Ray leaves the forest and returns to town with Jem. But he still looks emotionally damaged. The scars remain. One final scene shows Brian planting anemone flowers near the family home. This mirrors Ray's garden from earlier. But unlike Ray's isolated cabin, these flowers grow beside other people. That visual represents the film's deeper message. Pain survives in silence. Healing only begins when truth is shared. The movie suggests that trauma passes through generations until someone finally confronts it honestly. That is why the title Anemone matters so much. The flower survives storms by moving with them. The characters spent their entire lives resisting pain instead of facing it, and that resistance destroyed them. The final shot is beautiful. Ray stands silently watching the ocean, not smiling, not crying, just breathing. For the first time in decades, he looks free. Then the screen cuts to black. Anemone is not a loud movie. It is slow, heavy, and deeply emotional. But underneath the silence, it tells a powerful story about guilt, masculinity, family trauma, and forgiveness. Daniel Day-Lewis delivers an unforgettable performance. Every stare feels meaningful. Every pause feels painful. And the film constantly reminds viewers that some wounds never fully disappear. They only become easier to carry. And that was the full story of Anemone, 2025. What did you think about the ending? Do you believe Ray truly forgave Jem, or was the damage already too deep? Comment your thoughts below. If you enjoyed this explanation, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications because the next movie we're covering is even darker, and its ending shocked audiences worldwide. Until then, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next story.